Great. So we'll be using Node.js as our programming language. So Node.js is basically a JavaScript runtime that you can install within your machine. And you can develop a lot of applications, including backend, front end, or even mobile application if you like. So all you need to do is based on your operating system, you need to install Node.js within your machine in order to get started on this. So I'll be using the latest, not the latest one, at least the Node.js version available right now. So let me share my screen and show you guys what I mean. Hope you guys can see my screen. Okay. So basically what you need to do is you need to make sure that you guys have Node.js installed within your machine. And if you do not have Node.js, just it's like a basic simple installation. If you're in Windows, you just have to download the binary, execute. Same goes to Linux and Mac as well. So I'm in my Macintosh, so the instructions for downloading and installing is pretty much simple. All I have to do is install it. And for my personal preference, I would like to use not the binary version, but something called NVM, not version manager, as it calls. So NVM is a tool that helps us to build a tool that gives us ability to change our Node environment. So you guys know the Node has different versions or different environments that I can run it. So I have the latest version, maybe some of my projects would be in older Node version. So in order to do the version changes, everything, NVM is a great tool. So first install NVM, and using NVM, we can install the desired node as we speak. So right now, if I run node -v, that indicates the version that I am in. Currently, I am running version 19.9. It might be changed based on what you have installed. At least install something latest, something apart from Node 18. So that is like the latest one. Do not install very old version. That would definitely leave you guys with some headaches. Okay. So right now I'm having Node 19.4. and nodes coming with a lot of tools that we can use. Okay, so basically when we are developing a web application, or when we are developing some sort of mobile or web application, we do not start from the scratch nowadays. Okay, so the different frameworks, different programming languages, most of the time they have what we call a CLI. A CLI would be helpful if you like to generate application rather than doing it yourself, rather than doing it from scratch. Sometimes those frameworks help us with not only setting it up, but when we want to deploy the application. Okay, so for instance, we want to run this in some sort of a containerized environment, or if you need to run it somewhere in the cloud, the frameworks and the CLIs gives us those abilities as well. So we do not want to reinvent the wheel. Okay, so the application itself will generate very self-sustained, self-maintained application. That application would be able to run, and you guys can leverage the existing applications, or leverage the existing testing frameworks and a lot of things pre-built for you. Okay, so the CLI tool that I'm going to be using is what we call NX. Okay, so NX is NX what we call monorepo tool. Okay, if you do not know about monorepos, just give you a simple hint, like rather than putting all your codes in different repositories, we have one single repository that use for all our code management. So make sure you have NX installed in your machine. So if you have not installed, okay, if you have it not installed, then you can have the command npm. Npm also is a command that comes with node. Okay, so once you have node installed, you have npm as well. Npm stands for Node Package Manager, which will help us to install dependencies, packages, third-party dependencies, and all those things. So I have npm installed in here as well. So Node Package Manager. This is the version that I'm currently in. So using npm, I can install nx. Okay. So by default, as I mentioned earlier, you have node and npm. Using npm, you guys can install nx. So a simple command will be npm install -g nx. Okay. So let me double check the command npm install nx. Yeah. So you can use the nx command if you like, or you can have what we call the npx command. Npx stand for like rather than having nx globally installed -g in here, indicating that okay, for the whole computer we'll be using nx, but right now if you do not want to have nx within your whole machine, so what we will do is we will install using npx. It's like a temporary thing that we will be developing. So I will be using npx in this example. So I'll be working with I'll be in my temporary directory. So I'm not going to be able to have this project afterwards, and I hope not to continue this after the lectures. As soon as I'm done with it, I'm going to be get rid of this project. So what I'm going to do is I will say nx again, and nx will give us, okay, this is the command if you want to create a workspace. Okay, so workspace is something rather than other than generating a simple application. A workspace contains tools, generated application, and so on and so forth. So do not worry about those things right now. All you need to know is like workspace is a single place that you can work with. Okay. So all you have to do is run this command npx create nx workspace at latest, which means we will be using the latest workspace. In here, we have not selected anything for the application. Right now, we'll be working in solely on the simplest workspace generation. So I'll create. I will just name my workspace as ft. Okay, so you can name it whatever you want. Probably you will go with something more meaningful. So it will ask whether you to proceed. I'll say yes, and depending on your internet connection, depending on what sort of connection that you guys have, you will get immediate response or not. So the next thing is it will ask what sort of application that it need to generate. So nx is a multiple platform supported. That means you can create a React application, Vue application, Angular, or Node application. Since we are working with a web application, so these are like front-end web applications. So we will be focusing on in a different lecture on those things. Right now, we will be focusing on NT architecture. So it's easy to demonstrate NT architecture with the backend project. So I'll choose a node. And there are a lot of options that you can select from here. So these are the frameworks or the or the templates that you guys can use. So I'm going to be using something that I find quite easy to work with, which is called NestJS. Okay, you guys can select either one of these. Make sure you know the make sure you guys follow the same architectural pattern that we're going to be using. So I'm going to select NestJS, and whether it's asking for a standalone or integrated. Right now, I can go with integrated monorepo or standalone. The difference is if I selected integrated monorepo, then I can have my front end application in the same repository. That's what I mean by monorepos. If I say standalone, that's going to generate only a NestJS application. I won't be having any other application other than a NestJS application. That means only a backend application. Since I am not going to be integrating anything to this one, I'll just standalone. This is a Docker file. I would rather not go in there. CI building, no thanks. I do not need that. And so right now, what NX is doing is it is based on the inputs that I have given. It is creating a simple web application for us, and by the time the application is generated, we will be able to work with that. So it is downloading all the dependencies it needs. That means the web application it's not gonna be developing itself. That means it needs third-party dependencies. There are dependencies in hand right now. It is generating all the dependencies and take care of generating my project. So what I'll do is I will cd into the newly created workspace. So I will go to cd wsft and I will start Visual Studio Code from here. Let me share a new share, otherwise you guys won't see. I have Visual Studio Code and terminal and chat. Okay, so make sure you guys open it Visual Studio Code or something that's up to your liking. Right now, developing web application using VS Code is like really easy. So I would suggest use something like VS Code or IntelliJ platforms if you like. So it's still generating an application for me, and I'll briefly talk about the application architecture. Otherwise, you guys find a lot of files in here, and which will overwhelm you guys. So I'll just give you a brief introduction on what each of these files represent. If you want more detail, let's look into in a separate session on those things. Okay, right now the most important things that you guys know is this package JSON. So package JSON simply represent all the dependencies that we have within our project. Let me zoom it in a little bit so you guys can see. So this gives us a little bit idea of idea about our application. So these are the scripts. These are the things like we will be using to start the application, build the application, and test the application. Okay, so these script will help us to do those things. These are like metadata about the licensings and everything. And we have these things called dependencies. So these dependencies represents what sort of things that we'll be using within our application. Since we're using NestJS, so there are like dependencies which needs to run the application. So these dependencies are needed. And there are a few dev dependencies. These dev dependencies, what we call is, these are the things that we need in order to develop the application. But at the end, we won't be using these dev dependencies at the production build. We would not use something like we'll be using these things in development, but not development using in the develop. Sorry, we'll be using these things at the development time, but not at the runtime. Okay. Give me a second, guys. I have to push the recording. So in here, we have the Linux terminal. So if you do not have a terminal, there are a few options for Windows users. You can use the command line CMD tool, which is available. You can just search for CMD tools. It will pop up something similar, not the exact thing, but something similar. The CMD tool will help you guys to come across the command line tool. And the easiest way to verify that you have installed Node.js is to execute this command, node -v. Okay, so it will give you guys whether you have installed Node.js or not. Okay, so this indicates we have installed Node.js successfully. Using this Node.js, we can start developing applications. Okay, this is the runtime for our application. We have the runtime ready. Now we can develop applications. Okay, so Node.js comes with a package manager. Okay, a package manager, we can simply put, it's help us to develop application faster, build application faster, and execute some commands. So Node has a package manager. We call it Node package manager, simply put NPM. Okay, NPM stands for Node package manager. So Node package manager will help us to get libraries from internet that we can use. So we don't need to develop our own libraries from scratch. We can use existing libraries within our application. Okay, for example, let's say we want to write a simple web application. Okay, we need to write a simple web application. In order to write a simple web application, there are like servers available in handling request, response, and everything. So we can do it from scratch. Of course, we can write a Node.js class for that, but there are already built packages that can do the thing. So for example, if you go Node.js website, npm repository. Okay, so this is where you guys can get this is where you guys can check upon what are the existing package managers out there. Okay, so packages what are out there. So for example, I can search package something called a web server. So the well-known web server is called Express. Okay, do you have Express? Yes. So Express is a package or a library that we can use that to generate a simple web application. Okay, simple web application. So I can use Express rather than developing everything from scratch. I can simply use Express to develop a simple application. You guys can see there are examples in here that you guys can use to develop a simple web application. All right. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to install this Express application, right? We need to install this web application in our machine. So how do we use that? We use the command npm install, or npm I for short. So using this command, what it will do is it will install the Express library or Express package. Then we can use within our JavaScript code. Okay, so we do not develop everything from scratch. We use an existing package, and using that package, we can develop the software. So likewise, there are like thousands of Node packages that you can use with. When we are building application, we will be using a lot of Node packages. Okay, like Express, there is tslibs, you don't need to know everything. Even I don't know what are all the libraries are doing for, but at least what are the JavaScript development helping libraries out there. You guys can use those. Okay. So right now I'm simply using a simple not package, simply using not package manager to install a bunch of other softwares that will help me to develop a simple application. Okay, so make sure node is there, npm is there, and when you're using npm, make sure you know what is the library or the frameworks or the things that you're going to be using in here. Otherwise, it won't help you to work with. Okay. So we have npm installed, so I can even see the node package manager version. Okay, so right now we're using the version 9.0, which came along with this node version. So node package manager help us to get all the dependencies and running those script and everything. So we should know what are the packages that we're going to be using. Okay, anything up until this? Any questions with the node or npm? Anything unclear? Any questions with regarding those two? All good? Just give me the go ahead, then I will proceed. Otherwise, all good, guys? I'm not getting correct.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we have npm installed, node package manager and everything. Now what we need to do is, as I mentioned earlier, we need to generate a web application. Okay, especially a web application which will give us some API. Okay, we can expose some data. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna develop a REST API, which is something like when we're using a browser or a web client, we will request something from the server, and the server will respond a certain information back to us. It's like when we are looking into a web page. Okay, right now when we go to a web page, something like not npm.js.com, we get HTML response, right? We get the HTML response. So in a REST API, we would not get HTML response, but a simple JSON response. So we will see all these things in action. So right now, what we're going to be building is a simple REST API. Okay, if you do not know REST API, have a quick look around it. That is like the most common way of communicating these days. And REST.js, and there is GraphQL, one of the major things that we will be using. So make sure, if you do not know what we're going to be building, just have a look around what is a REST API. But in this scenario, we'll be developing a simple REST API. Okay, and we will be developing the API, and we will be applying the basic architectural patterns in while we are doing it. We will, you guys can see, if you guys can see, take this example, the Express example. It is also developing something like what we call a REST API. It's not practically a REST API, but it is something like that. But we can also work. We can also show a simple application using these packages. Okay, let me demonstrate so you guys can get a better idea. We'll just use a simple Express application, and we will see the pros and cons of this application, and why this application or why this architecture will not suffice for a huge application. Why we need to architect better than something like this. Okay, so Let me quickly grab this example and try to run this. So let me once again, I'll go to a directory where I can work without an issue. I am in my temporary directory, which is like a directory will be once I'm restarting the computer, whatever in this temporary directory will be gone. Okay, but if you're working something solid project, choose my documents or projects or somewhere else, so you guys can work there. So I will create a directory, mkdir, or you can say right click new folder, mkdir, I will say express. Okay, so I can go to express directory. Now if I use VS Code and I will open the project in that same directory. So I'm actually in the directory that I have created in under TMP Express. I have opened it using VS Code. You can use file and open, and you will have the same thing as I did earlier on. So let me share that as well now. Okay, so I have the open editor for that. So within the Express directory, I'll simply create a simple application. Normally we call it at app.js, which indicate application. So I hit enter, and I will copy paste the application that is giving in here, and you guys can see this is going to be a simple application I'll be developing. I'll show you guys what is the outcome of this. So the outcome of this application would be simply showing a message called hello world. That is the outcome of this application. Let me get rid of these things. Okay. So in order to run this code, what I need is something called Express. So I do not have Express installed in my machine. I do not have Express within my app.js. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install Express, the package that I show you guys in here, using this command npm I express. So make sure my terminal is where I am in the current project. I'm going to say npm install express. Let me copy the command in here, and I will install express. So what it's going to do is, using npm, I will install express into my coding area. So if I go back in here, you guys will see few things have changed around here. Okay, the first thing is there is something called node modules. So node modules containing all the dependencies within my application. So I have only dependent on Express, but the thing is, Express is not going to run its own. Express is depending on other packages. Okay, so this is the Express that we have installed, but Express is not going to work alone. Express depending on other packages, like eTag is something Express will be depending on. All the other packages directly or indirectly depend on Express. So Express is depending on all these packages. So npm is smart enough. Okay. If you are using Express, you need eTag also within you. So it will install eTag. So sometimes eTag might be eTag is depending on something else. It will download that. We can actually see what's depending on what. So if I go to the package organization, this is like where we have all the dependencies listed out in our application. So right now you can see my application, I am depending on Express, especially Express version 4.18.2. So I'm depending on this version. Okay. So this version you can find within Node modules. This is where the Express binaries are, the library things are. And you will find Express in my Node module. And if you go to Express, also there will be a package JSON. And within Express.js, you can see what are the packages Express is depending on. So it depending on accept, cookies, fresh, a lot of things are in here. I will take something like accepts. So whenever Express is installed, it automatically also download accepts this library. I actually do not know what it even the purpose is. It is installing accepts. So if I go back to accepts in here, and I can see packages, accept is depending on MIME types and everything. So you guys get the picture. There's a tree of dependencies. All these tree of dependencies will get resolved until the package do not have any dependencies to depend on. Okay, so the last one would definitely not have any dependencies. By that time, we will have all the dependencies installed. So now, in order to run my application, in order to run this application, all the dependencies, all the necessary application stuff is here with me. I do not need anything else to run. Everything is runnable at this moment. So you guys get the idea on the package JSON. So package JSON file, all the dependencies, what are the libraries that we are developing depending on, it's gonna have those information in here. And all the dependencies that we are gonna have will be within this Node module application now. So this is gonna contain all the binaries, and this is gonna express what are the things we are depending on. Okay, for now, just ignore the package lock JSON. It's gonna specifically lock the version. Okay, so we created app.json, app.js. This is the file that we have created, and this is the package we are depending on. So anything up until this you guys did not get? Please confirm that you guys got this so we can continue. Anything if you have anything at the moment, just interrupt me and I'll answer. Okay, so basically this is what Node.js application would look like. But if you use something like a Java application, the terminologies will change, but the application structure most of the time remains same. So for example, if you're using Java web application, then we will have we won't find Express in Java, right? Java is a different ecosystem. It has own libraries and everything. You won't find Express in Java, but you will find something similar. You will find something like Tomcat, Undertow, or even there are Reactive's web services. There are a lot of similar products which represent a web service. Okay, so Java do not have npm. Not package manager is available for not npm available for Node.js only. So you won't find that in Java, but you will find something similar like Maven, Gradle. The ecosystem grows. Okay, so all you need to know is there are strikingly similar things that happens in different frameworks, different worlds, but they have the same thing. Okay, if you are developing same thing, if you go to C# world, okay, so if you go to C# world, okay, you have frameworks like .NET Core and IIS server, those kind of things. It's same thing. You will have the NuGet package manager, like you see in npm. In C#, you will say NuGet package manager. All you need to do is adapt to that framework. Okay, so there are a lot of frameworks and everything's going on. If you are using Python, you will see frameworks like Django. Okay, fast API as your server, and you have unicorn servers. And the package manager, or when you want to handle your dependencies, you will use something like pip, Python package manager for installing different libraries. So you guys get the idea. They have all similar things. We will get, when we are looking at other architectural patterns, I'm not gonna go everything in Node.js. We will have other projects concluding in other frameworks, like we will create a mobile application, we will create a microservice application. So we will use different frameworks and different things. Okay. Only thing that you guys need to know that different frameworks have different package managers, different web servers, depending on what you are developing. You guys need to adapt to that. That's it. Okay. So, so what we can do is we have installed the necessary packages which we can run this application. Now we need to run this. Okay, we will run this and see the result, and we will get back and try to understand this piece of code. Okay. All right. In order to run this application, what I need to do is I need to be in the same directory where my project is. Yeah. So if I list down all the things in my directory, I can see that app.js is one in here. That means I can run this application, and you guys can see the node modules and everything. So all I need to do is run this application and see whether it is starting a web server. So in order to run this application, all I have to do is say node app.js. Okay. So if everything is in order, if I did everything correctly, so what should happen is it seems to be running. It's not giving me an error. So I suppose this is running. So all I need to do is, you guys can see it is listening on port 3000. That means this application is now running, the web server is running. The web server is running on port 3000. Okay, so if I go to port 3000 within my machine, I would see something. Okay, let's see what we can get when we go to port 3000. So how we can access, since this is a REST API and simple REST API is there, I can use our browser. Okay, we can use the browser. If I am not using the browser, I can use a client. Okay, so I can use a client like curl. So I can look around it. So I can use something like curl local host port 3000. Okay, so it's simply saying go to this address. Localhost is my own machine. Since I am working on my same machine, it will be localhost. The port I'm interested in is 3000. So if I hit enter and I get the response back message, hello world. Okay, so I can get the similar or the same result since this is a simple web API. If I go to my browser and if I go to port 3000, localhost 3000, then I get this same message, but in a little bit of JSON format. You might see something like this. I have this JSON parser, which helped me to understand this one a little bit easier. So you guys can see that I am seeing the message hello world, which I put in the section. But if I want to say hello Randika, this would not probably show. Yeah. So I have changed the code, hello Randika. So now what I have to do is go to my terminal, and you guys can see it is still running the old version. I will terminate it. You can use Control-C, or in Macintosh, we would use, in Macintosh, it's even Control-C. By hitting Control-C, it will terminate the running process. Now I can run again the node app.js. And if I go back to the controller, if I go back to my browser, still I am seeing the old one. If I refresh, and I can see hello Randika. Okay, so simple web message got back to me. So this is in a format called JSON. JSON is like the go-to representation of REST API right now what we are using. So if you do not know JSON, have a look around JSON and JSON's what it represents. Simply, it is a representation of information. Okay. So if you look at the NodeJS website, the website that we are seeing right now, this is represented in XML. Okay, XML and everything. If you go to inspect, and if you go to source, and if you go to the current, you guys can see this is a representation. Let me try to get it more around here. So this is the representation that we are getting out of this XML. Okay, this XML represent this, a lot of information is there. But using this HTML language, we can render out here, but there might be some styling going on, there might be going on some JavaScript. Still, the representation is giving us this page. Okay. Likewise, the Node.js, the JSON that what we are seeing, if you go to inspect, and you guys can see this is like passed a little bit, but if I close this and go to view page source, you guys can see it is simply a representation like this. So the browser does not know how to format JSON like this, but we can just see what it is sending us back. In here, I have a plugin, a Chrome plugin, which show this one as a little bit nicer. But if I show the raw version, this is what I am getting from the server itself. Okay. So let me go back to the code and try to explain what we are trying to do in here. So what we are simply doing is, first, in the first line, we are importing, we are requiring the Express server. Okay. So we will be creating a server using Express. So in order to use Express, we need to first import it. Okay. So the first line is the definition of getting Express into our code. And there is more elegant way to import. This is also something that you will find similar. So basically, languages like Python, Java, we find a similar implementation when we are importing such a thing. You can use the required version. It is also okay in JavaScript world, but probably the latest ES6 modules will represent importing like this. Okay, remember this is also okay, but this is like the old version. It say use ES module imports, so it will import something like this. So we are basically saying we are importing Express, the package we have installed, and we are creating an instance of it. Okay, we are creating an instance of the Express. Okay, the next thing is we are instructing Express. Okay, we have created the Express app. Simply, if somebody try to get, so get in the sense, get is like what we call REST operations. Okay, we, as I mentioned earlier, we are developing a REST API in here. So if somebody get to this URL, that means we call this as the root. If somebody gets to the root of our application, this function will be executed. This is the function that if somebody comes to the root of our application, this function will be executed, and the function will contain two things: the request and the response. The request is whenever the user is requesting something, it represents the request, and whenever we want to send something, it represents the response. Okay, so we have the request and the response. All we need to do is, we are not much caring about the request itself. In the response, I would say the response, send a JSON with this message. So I am responding whenever somebody is coming to the root of the application, I am responding a JSON. It is going to be representing like this. It's going to have a message and the message value itself. So I'll be responding a message if somebody comes to the root of my application. Okay, and Next thing we need to do is we need to say, okay, the application is created. Now it need to go live. It need to start working. So that's why we use the listen method. That means we need to say, okay, we will start our application in port 3000. So since this is a web server, web service, we'll simply have something in the port 3000. You can use any other port which is available in your machine, something not is reserved in your machine, like do not use port under 1024, which are like we consider reserved ports, like port 80, 443. Those things have different meanings, different use cases. Do not use something like that. Use a higher port like 3000 or anything about 3000 or 2000 above. So we will create the Express application, and if somebody comes to the root of our application, we will simply respond with a JSON containing this, and we will start listening on port 3000. And we can have more API endpoints. Okay, we can have more API endpoints. I would say if somebody comes to root and in message endpoint. So now the endpoint is different as long as the 2.2 endpoints are not the same value. We can have any number of endpoints. So I think there is a limit, but technically we can have any a lot of endpoints to our use. So if somebody comes to root of our application or root of our endpoints, it will save this. If somebody comes to root/message, I will say hello, hello users of REST. Okay. So basically, a simple if somebody comes to the root, they will get this message, and root/message. If somebody comes in, the response will be a little bit different. So let's see this in action. I will terminate the running application by hitting Ctrl+C, and I will run it again. Package.json. This is like when we are using the Express version with the ES module. So I will revert this back. It's gonna give me const express require express. Okay, I'll keep the same version. I might need to do some packaging changes. So in order to avoid that, as a shortcut, I would definitely use the required import section. Okay, we'll see import in our next one. Right now, we'll use require as import mechanism. All right, let's clear and run it again. No issues right now. So if I go to you guys can see the / is not there. If you put it there, it will be disappeared. That's done by browser. So we consider this as the root. So hello Ramdika is shown. And if I put / message in here, and you guys can see hello users of REST. Okay, so we get different response based on the different routes that we can do. So there can be, we can generate any number of routes which will correspond our application. So this is like simple REST API that we have generated. Okay, so up until this, you guys have any questions with the simple REST API we have developed? Any questions? Just clarify. Get your clarification and move forward. If you do not understand, just let me know. Do not think that asking question is a weaker mind or something that you put in that you will be put in highlight or something like that. More questions that you ask, the more knowledge that you gain. Okay, to ask question. Any question? Anyone? Anything? All good? Okay. Anyone have any doubts? Just let me know. Okay. So right now, let me explain it one more time so you guys can get the idea. So right now, we are trying to get some message in our browser. Okay. So it's going to be represented in JSON. So JSON is like a way of showing us some messages or showing us some information. So the message or the information that we are trying to show is something called message, and the message is going to be this. Okay. So let me change the response. So say for instance, I would go to endpoint like 3000 Randika. So in my web service, I should have a web endpoint called Randika. Right now, if you guys go here, you won't find an endpoint like this. Okay, you don't find an endpoint. So let me create an endpoint which represent the URL. So I will have an endpoint, a get endpoint. By default, when we are doing a request, it is going to be a get request. So the REST endpoint is going to be Randika. Okay, the endpoint is going to be Randika. And whoever comes to this endpoint, whoever comes to this Randika endpoint, will receive a message, whatever within this function itself. Okay, so the message that I'm going to be showing in here is going to be something called name. Okay, so it's showing me Randika, and I would say I have something like age. I think I'm 30, not sure. I haven't counted it yet. And I will say city, and I would say Matali. So if somebody comes to endpoint called Randika, and it will give information about me, something like this. Name is going to be Randika, age is going to be 30, city will be Matala. Okay, so if somebody comes to this URL or endpoint, we will get this message as in a JSON format. It's going to be a JSON format that we will be seeing this. So how I'm going to run this? I'm going to completely stop the running application, Control C, and I'm going to run it again. Okay. Now, if I go to endpoint localhost 3000, as you guys can see, I am running this web server in port 3000. Port 3000 is where I'm running this application. The port 3000 application will run my Express application. Okay. So this Express application has 3 endpoints: the root endpoint, message endpoint, run the endpoint. Okay. So if I go to root, localhost 3000 root, I will get this. Localhost 3000 message, I will get whatever in this function. Localhost Randika, I will get whatever in this function as a JSON. Okay. So if I go to localhost Randika, and you guys can see name, age, and city is represented to me. So this is a representation of Randika. Okay. So you can have anything like what you have. Say for example, I need to show the current time. Okay, I need to return the current time, and I need to return, say for example, I need to return the current country and everything. So I can do that. Let me create another endpoint. My endpoint would be time, okay, to show the time. And the representation of the time is going to be something like time, and I can show the time by simply calling new date function. So the time will be represented by new date. That means it will return the current time. And I want to represent country, and I can say Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka. And I'll format my document so it will look like this. So I have an endpoint called time, and the time endpoint will return the latest time and the country of origin. So the country will not change. But the time or the date, the time in here, what we'll see, it's gonna be a little bit different as we request. Because each time when we request, it's gonna create a new date and it will show. Let's see it in action so you guys get the idea. So we have created an endpoint called time. I'll stop the application and run it again. Okay, now if I go to an endpoint called time, you guys can see the time is this. Okay, so it's going to represent the date and the time and the zone. Okay, so remember these numbers, at least these ones, at least these n numbers. Okay, and if I refresh again, you guys can see the time changes, because whenever I am requesting, it's going to give me the current time. It's going to give me the current time. So how do I get the current time? By simply calling new date function or new date class. So if I refresh, every time I refresh, you guys can see at least the milliseconds of it. It is changing. So we get different time each time when we refresh or when we call the class. Okay. So basically, what we are doing is we are creating an endpoint. Which will represent some data. If you go to Randika endpoint, you will get about information about Randika. If you go to the time endpoint, you will get something like the date and everything. It can be it can have anything that you like. It can represent data from a database. Right now, what we are representing data, which is hard coded in here. Okay, we are not getting any data from a database even. We can do that even. Okay, we will see that in later on. Right now, we are showing some dynamic data and some static data. So the time is at least dynamic. The country is actually static information. Okay, so we can represent any information like this. Okay, I have a question. So appliances is like object. If we can create more objects. Okay, so the question is, we have app express in here. So what we are creating is, yes, it is something similar to an object. It is not a simple object that we see like when we are creating a new date. Yes, this will create a new object. But in here, we are instantiating a new express instance. It is something similar to instantiation object, but a little bit different. Okay, so yeah, the question is, we can have many app expresses. We can have multiple app express instance, but it's very rare to have two different apps in one single application. Believe me, having a one single express application in this scenario is getting more complicated than you think. Okay, we can have several express instances. We can have listening them on different ports. Yes, we can do that. But that is like really a bad idea to do. It will not be very what do you call it? Simply it won't be able to simply scale and everything. It won't happen. So basically, we will create one single express application and we will serve it under this port. If you need more, I would recommend to have another express instance, probably a separate application, a separate, let's say we want to have another app, we can create app 2 and have the same thing. Do not use the same port. You can't actually use the same port. If you use port 3000 in one single application, until the program is terminated, this one is blocked. Okay, you have to use a different port. So for example, if you can see that right now I am using port 3000 in this application. And if I try to run this again, I'd say not app.js, you guys can see listening address already in use. So I can't run it again because it's already in use. So make sure to change the port number, at least it is not used by something. Then you can create another app instance and run. And my recommendation is do not use two app instances in here. in the same application at least, have to separate files, so it will make more sense. Okay. Yes. Good questions. Anything you guys need to ask more? I need your confirmation if all of you guys get these things. Oops. Okay, how do we note the reserved ports? Yes. So basically reserved ports are, as I mentioned, the ports, normally we consider reserved ports up until port 1024. If you do a Google search, you will get reserved ports. OS reserved ports. Yes, normally, yes, from 0 to 1023 is known as reserve ports. So anything above, you can use these, but probably do not use like 10,024 something like that. Use a higher port number. The more higher you get, you can go. But there is a higher upper limit. I think 16,000 or something like that. So do not use a reserve port. These ports will not, simply the operating system will not allow to run. So if I go here and change this to like 80, so 80 or something like that, and if I try to stop this and if I try to run this, think the 80 is not taken at the moment. I have allowed it. Localhost on the, yeah, for this machine, you get the 80 since I am not using 80, but probably you would not be using a reserved port. Okay, so you guys can see, since I am using port 80, I do not need to use even the port 80 over here. You can just simply, yeah, you can simply have that port. But if you, I'm not sure, 443 is HTTPS, what we call. Let me try if I can. I will definitely get an error at least. No, port 443 still comes. Let me know well-known port like 22, which is HTTPS port. Still works. Yeah, you do not use these kind of ports, you know, you can't get the hold of it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it not. Because the port 22 is known as the SFTP ports. So those ports won't be in use. So do not use something like well-known ones. Use something like 3000, 3003. There are other numbers you guys can play around. Do not have like a very small number. So well-known ports, skip those things. Use very higher up. Okay. So probably well-known ports are like 22, 443, 80. There are like different TCP connection based on those things. Do not use these things. Anything else, guys? So it's gonna differ from the operating system as well. Some operating system have different, but standard wise, you don't need, do not try any reserve ports up until 1023. Good questions. Yes. Any other things that you guys need to know before we proceed? Is port used for the access the server in this application? I did not get the question correctly. Is the port used for the access the server is this application. Maybe you can explain the question a little bit. I did not get the question, like what you're asking right now. Last chat message, I can't understand actually. So index number, I think 1048. What you're asking, I'm not getting that. Please clarify me more. Okay, any other questions, guys? 1048, you can ask if you want, you can unmute and ask. Better you guys use your real names. Okay, what is the purpose of port number? Okay, so the port number is something like when you are using a port, you don't have any other application interfering with your data. Okay, so for example, a certain port will only deliver certain content. Let me give an example. If you find internet as a huge tube, okay, think the connections that you have is as a huge tube, okay, and within that huge tube you have different smaller tubes which is running on inside that, okay. So when you are sending a certain values in a smaller tube, what will happen is the other tubes around it does not know what is the content is. Okay, what you are sending in a smaller tube does not know or does not interfere with other tubes. So it's the same scenario in here. So if you have a single connection and you want to send multiple data, multiple protocols, and the way to divide those things is use a port. So when you're using a port, the data which is coming from one single port is not interfering with something else. For example, we have well-known ports like the SSH. SSH, we use port 22. SSH is the well-known port for SSHing to a, that means remote connecting to a machine. We use the port 22 for that. Okay, that is like a well standard. You can use any other port. Okay, the well-known port is 22. So if you are SSHing from port 22 and the well-known port for serving a web application is port 80. So you can serve a web page in port 80 while you are SSHing it in port 22. So those two different things. So you do not interfere the SSH stuff with the HTTP stuff. So it make the differences, and different ports can have different applications running. They can have different data going on there. So the protocols can be different, and it is easy to manage data in a way that they do not conflict with each other. Okay, so that's why we use ports. So we can run one single application in port 3000. We can run another application in port 4200 or anything above well-known ports. Okay, so those two will not get interfered with each other. Those two ports will serve content in different times. Hope that answer your question. Okay. Any other questions? Yes. All good? Anyone have any other things to ask? So few things that you guys need to do research on your end. First, I might take this as an assignment as well. I will send it in the group. What is REST API and name for REST methods? Okay. The second one is what is JSON Third one is what is XML. Okay, so do your research and find find what are these things and prepare a small assignment on that. Okay. All right. Any more questions? Yes. Good. Any more questions that you need to ask? Okay. All right. Okay. So we developed a very simple REST API using Express and using some of the methods. Only we use the REST API method called get. There are other methods while you're doing. We will find other methods as well. Learn the difference. What is the REST commands and what are the different methods that you can work with. Okay. So if you are coming to in the industry, you as a web developer or maybe a mobile developer, someone else, something like that, you're definitely going to learn REST in much more detail. I mean, at least you need to interact with this. So better you guys know the things behind these technologies, so you guys get a good idea. Yeah, for references part, use internet. It's the best best I can do. You would probably find a lot of information in internet. You guys, even Wikipedia would do. Okay, and if you need more web focused one, I would probably use W3 Schools. It has all these things. Okay, any more questions before we move on? So we create a simple web service, okay, web server. By creating this simple web server, we were able to generate few endpoints, which is the root endpoint, the message endpoint, Randika, and time endpoint. So different endpoints give us different outputs. Okay, and all these endpoints give us a JSON by default. That is like most commonly used in REST API. So in here we are using JSON as well. So the JSON output that we are seeing is different from one to another. Okay, that is okay. So you guys go and develop some simple REST endpoints, okay, like this. So this is going to be very simple one, but the problem arises when we are developing web applications. It's gonna get really complicated than this. Okay, so for example, when we want to show some data in a JSON format, it's not going to be something like we call these hard code values. Okay, the values are the values that we get when we go to the endpoint are hard coded into the source code. Okay, it's embedded in the source code. But for some reason, say for instance, we need something like this information, some information to be fetched from the database. Okay, we can't have those everything in here, so we need to connect to the database and retrieve the database values, and once we retrieve those values, we need to show or we need to send it back. So pretty simply, the application will get complicated enough, so we can't handle our requests. So the database query is going to be there. You guys know database queries. So database queries will be there. We need to execute those queries. We need to make a database connection. And once the query is executed, we need to return the value. There are a lot of things going to add into this application. This application is going to get really messy, really in a really small time. Okay, so in order to make sure that our application can grow, okay, the application can grow, and our application will have our application will be able to scale. And when the next developer comes, they won't find 1,000 endpoints within the same application. And we have written a good amount of test cases to test our application. So this way of coding, this what we call the architecture, the simple one that we have come across would not suffice. This application will simply fail. Okay, so what we can do is we can develop an architecture. We can develop an architecture that will be less complicated. Okay, remember these by applying an architecture, it does not mean everything that we have is going to be solved. Okay, by simply applying a software architecture, it will reduce the complexity. Of course, it will reduce the complexity, and it will be understood by most majority of our users or our developers. So, for example, if we develop an application like this might be our own style. Okay, I can develop an application like this. I have everything working fine. Okay, if I can manage 1,000 endpoints like this, yes, that is fine. But the problem is, if I want to give this source code to someone else, will that person understand what I am trying to do? Okay, will that person will have a hard time understanding the code itself? So by providing a simple architecture, by providing a simple methodology to that, what will happen is it will guarantee that, okay, everybody knows this is how it should get done. Okay, this is a methodology that everybody is following. So the next person would come and say, okay, I know this methodology. I have to just implement using these things. So an architecture gives us guidance, or it gives us proper structure and a proper way of doing things. But remember, the software architecture, the way of we organize our code, the way of we gonna implement such a thing is gonna be different on the different project or different application that we are developing. Okay, so for a web application, we can have a different architecture. For a mobile application, we can have a different architecture. That's because the purpose of the application is different from one to another. So mobile application have different restrictions, different mechanisms how they works, and different limitations with the resources and all. A web application such as a REST API that we have developed, it's going to be running on a server. We have certain server limitations. We have certain database limitation and all sort of things. So based on the application that we're going to be developing, based on the technologies that we are having, the architecture of the program will differ. But most commonly with web applications, right now, when we are developing a web application, we find that the NT architecture or 3-tier architecture at least works better with our code organization. The NT architecture, if we write an NT architecture application, it would make our life easy. And if somebody comes tomorrow and join our team, and we can say, okay, our application is following NT architecture, and we all agree upon how NT architecture should work. Okay, we will learn certain things in NT architecture. So next time when you go to industry and you guys can ask, okay, we have a web application, you can ask, okay, good. What is the architecture that we are using? So they might say, oh, we are using NT architecture. So you don't need to know, okay, NT architecture by NT architecture. We have certain components, we have such and such. Then you will easily understand what they are talking about. Okay. The software architecture is something like that. It is a well-known practices, well-known things that will overcome the common problems that we are having. So for example, we all know, okay, when we are talking about NT architecture, the whole development teams have the idea of, okay, when we are developing this application, there will be this, and we have to follow those things. So it won't make you an outcast or the project leads outcast. So we know, okay, when we are developing this application, we are following these principles. We are at this point, and we are using these things. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, for web applications, for simple REST API applications, we find the NT architecture to be working perfectly. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, NT architecture will not be very suitable for our mobile application. Sometimes it might work, sometimes it's not. There are different architectural patterns that we can use. But for starters, the simplest form, developing a simple web application, we will talk about the NT architecture. Okay. So any questions about what we have discussed, why we need an architectural pattern, and what sort of things it try to resolve? It's trying basically an architectural pattern will give formal structure to our project, and all the software team will be in sync up with the technologies. And when you want to learn the way how software is organized, so you guys can refer that architect and adapt to them. So there are a lot of architects going on. Remember, based on the project, those architects can be different. Okay. So any questions? Anything? Definitely this will be uploaded, no worry. Any questions? Okay, hope not. Okay, let's see. So we'll move into the NT architecture. So you guys can see in the sample application, the sample express application that we have created, we have several things. Okay, we have several things. So you guys can see we are accepting a request. Okay, we are accepting a request. The client is asking something, and we are responding to that. So we have what we call a request, and we have something called a response. Okay, so some request can be grouped together. Some requests represent the same set of values. For example, in this scenario, we do not see strikingly similar things. So all these things are like several different things. But when we are working with a good application, some features have tied together, some features will have different purposes. Okay, for example, normally we call these things as CRUD operations. Okay, CRUD operations, we call these things. So the CRUD operations stick together. So what do you understand by a CRUD operation? So in CRUD, C-R-U-D, we call this create, read, update, delete request. Okay, so that's the basic of what it stands for, at least. CRUD. Okay, do a simple look at around CRUD. So CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. So in a system, say for example, we want to develop a simple user management system. We want to develop a simple user management system. In that user management system, we need to be able to create users. So for example, we want to create a user with the name, email. That's it. Okay, we do not need anything else. Within our system, what it will do is create a user with a username or email. On that, we need to create the user. Okay, that's we call the create operation. And sometimes back, sometimes later, we need to read all the users. That means we need to get all the users within our system. Let's say, for example, now we have 100 registered people. We need to get those 100 people. Okay, that is what we call the read operation. Okay, sometimes we do not need the 100 users, but we need a certain user, one single certain user, which have the let's say, which have the email example.com. Okay, we need one single particular user which has one single user. We need to read it back from the system. So that we call a read. We can have multiple users or we can have one single user. Either way, we're going to be reading users from the system. And there will be other operations such as update operations. So what we call update request. So sometimes, when we are working with the system, we need to update a particular user's information. For example, a user can have a first name and a last name, and we need, for some reason, they have either misspelled the first name, and we need to update that record. We do not need to create a new record. Okay, we need to update an existing record. So we call that a update request. And finally, we have something like a delete request, which will delete the record from our application. Okay, so that is what we call a delete request. So these four request types are mostly common within a system that you guys will develop. So this is very common in web application. So we call these CRUD operations. So we will create a CRUD operation that is only for users. We can create users, read users, update users, and delete users. And we can have CRUD operations for another thing. For example, we also want to manage, let's say, schools. Okay, so we need to create a school. We need to read the school name or information about one single school or more than one single school. So we need to read, we need to update some certain information, and sometimes we need to delete. Okay, the CRUD is not like always going to be all those four things going to be there, but basically when we are developing an application, we implement all those CRUD operations. Okay, so when we develop such a thing, so we have the user CRUD and school CRUD. And think about another thing, like we need to manage teachers. Okay, so the teachers CRUD. So we have teacher create, teacher reads, teacher update, teacher delete. So you guys can see in a very complex system, we will have a lot of CRUD operations. Not only CRUD operations, there will be some actions as well. So we will definitely we'll look into actions later on. But for now, we will simply look at CRUD operations. Okay. So when we talk about the user had 4 CRUD operations. Okay, let's for those 4 CRUD operations, we will have 4 endpoints. Okay, so right now we have one single endpoint in here, another one here, and another one here. So we have totally 4 endpoints, but all are read operations. These are what we call read operation. Get is a read operation. But for a user, we can have 4 different endpoints. One for create, one for read, one for update, one for delete. Okay, so you guys can see a single user will have 4 endpoints, at least 4 endpoints, and school can have 4 endpoints, and this file which handle all these requests is gonna get bigger and bigger. Okay, so at least for operations we will add for one type we will have 4. So if think about we in a professional system, normally it contains like 10 to 20 of such things, then it will explode. The file will not be able, you can't even find whatever you need in a single file. So what we need to do is we need to separate things. We need to separate. Okay. So when we are talking about user will have its own CRUD operations. When we're talking about the school, each school will have a separate CRUD operation file. And so please goes on. So we will be developing such application. So we would have all the CRUD endpoints in different locations. Okay, so that is one thing, the CRUD endpoints, the endpoints that we have discussed. And the next thing that requires is the logic behind it. Okay, the logic behind it. So something in here, we are simply returning all these things are just simply showing a value. But in reality, what will happen is we can't have such simple get request. That means we are not going to simply show these values by hard coding these things. We will definitely talk to a database. Okay, we will definitely need some operations to happen. Okay, so for example, we want to delete a school. Okay, we want to delete a school in our system. There will be certain rules that we need to follow. You can't just delete school from the system. You might need special permission if you are doing such a thing. Okay, you can't just anybody comes and delete a school. That system would not be a really good one. Sometimes, if you want to delete such important record, you need permissions. Sometimes you will as some two people should vote on it. Once they have done the voting, then you can delete that. That's kind of what we call logic's gonna be there. We call those things logic. In system like this, we call those things as business logic. Okay, when we want to operate something, when we want to do something, we will have something called a business logics. Okay, say for instance that logic should be implemented in here as well. So somebody send a delete request, and delete request need to be going through some business logics, and we need to check all those logics and everything. And this file, what will happen, all those logics going to be within this simple file. This file will explode. Okay, and when somebody is looking at this file, the file is going to be like 10,000 or 20,000 long, and it will not make sense to look into a huge file like that. Sorry. So what we will do is, we, rather than writing everything in one single file or one single location, we will move the business logic into a separate file, or what we call a separate layer. Okay, so all the requests that are coming, the request that can be a read request, update request, delete request, or any CRUD request. So all the requests that is coming will be handled by a single layer. Okay, all the request handling will be done by a single layer, and once that layer get the message, the business logic will be handled in a separate layer. Okay, it will be handled in a separate layer. So why we are layering these things? The first thing is the complexity will grow. Okay, everything, if we put everything in one single file, one single layer, the layer will really be really will get big, and you can't have all these logics and everything in one single file. It's hard to read. Okay, so what we'll do is, all the requests that we are getting will be in one single layer, and once the request is received to us, the business logic will be in a different layer. Okay, the business logic will be in a different layer. Okay, so the business logic, when we move the business logic to a different layer, the business logic might need something from another place. For example, in order to create a single user or something like that, the business logic need to talk to a database. We need to talk to a database. In a scenario where we want to talk to a database, then the database connections and everything should be in that business logic. So that's gonna crowd the business logic layer. So in order to access databases, anything related to database, we separate the data layer, the data communication layer, especially with the database or another service. We separate another layer out of the business logic to a data layer. So we have 3 layers now. The first one is the request layer. Second one is the business logic layer. Third one is the data layer. So any request coming in, we will first encounter with the request layer. Anything that need to be calculated, any business logic need to be happen, we will do it in the business logic layer. And we have a third layer, which will be accessing all those data. Okay, so you guys can see 3 tiers: the request tier, business logic, and the data. Okay, so that's how a 3-tier architecture representation happens. So we have 3 tiers: request, business logic, and model or the database. So this is like the common architecture pattern that you guys can use. Okay, it is only 3 layers, but it is not limited to 3. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the architecture patterns, the NT architecture pattern, N. Okay, the word N represents any number. But for most common problems that you will see today with applications such as web application, 3-tier would be enough. Okay, I'm not saying it is always going to be the case. 3 tiers will be enough. If you want more layers, of course, you can add. Say, for example, your business logic is really complex. Okay, the business logic is really complex. In a case like that, you can divide the business logic into 2 or 3 layers. So that will add more layers in between. Okay, it is not limited to 3, but you can have multiple layers. Okay, depending on your project and it is complexity. So the request layer normally stays around with 1 layer, that is like normal. But as I mentioned earlier, it is not limited to having one single layer for handling request. It can have multiple layers. That is also fine. Business logic, as I mentioned earlier, if it is very complex, we separate the business logic into separate layers. Data layer is also there. Normally, we can have many more layers. Okay, but simply there will be 3 layers at most. Sometimes somebody can use 2 layers if they want, but a recommendation for a web application, my recommendation, at least what most users will get, is a 3-tier or 3-tier architecture. Right now, we have all those 3 tiers in one single file. Okay, so we have the request. This is the request endpoint, and we have our business logic in here. Since we do not have a data layer, the data layer is also in here. Okay, so all these three layers, 3 things are within one single request. So this is considered to be bad practice. Let me tell you why this is bad. After we implement a sample application using 3-tier architecture. Okay, so this is working. Okay, this is working perfectly. Anyone can code like this. A project can run like this. Yes, you can, but on the long run, this would definitely give us headache. Okay, so we have the request layer, we have the business logic layer, and we have the data layer all in one single location. We will try to tear these up into 3 different layers and see how we can work with that. Okay, so anyone have any questions with the 3 tiers, the request, business logic, and the data? Anyone have any questions regarding those 3 layers? Anything that need to be clarified? Okay, suppose everybody got the 3 tiers that we'll be working on, and we will see how we can create a simple web application that represent these 3 tiers. Okay, so as you guys can see, I used a very simple single file, the app.js file, to create a simple application. But as mentioned earlier, nowadays we do not develop application like this. Okay, so you need to find all the packages. We need to have all these things. There are like certain other aspects of the program that we need to work on, like certainly the structure of the program, how we can structure it. Okay, and what are the testing frameworks? Of course, our code need to be tested out. Okay, so what is the testing framework that we're going to use, and how we're going to set up within our program, and what are the things that we will be using to deploy this. Okay, so all those things are all done over and over and over again. We come to what we call a template. Okay, a template that we can use to kickstart our project. Okay, rather than putting all the dependencies, all the testing frameworks, and all the building script and everything. You don't need to worry all this from scratch. What we can do is we can use a code generation tool that will help us to create an application, so that we don't need to do the heavy lifting when we are creating a file. So that's what I use in here. We use the program called we use the program called NX. Okay, the NX is a tool that we can bootstrap our application, that we can create an application, so we don't have to create it from scratch. Okay, so in we need to install NX, like we did in NodeJS. We need to install NX. Okay, or we can use NX based simple tools that we can that we can create the application. Let me, okay. Okay, let me stop the current application. I will see the back. So in order to create an NX application, as I mentioned earlier, there is the website called NXDev. Okay, so you can create a simple workspace, that means a simple project using this command. So you can install this npx create NX workspace command in order to create a new fresh web application. Okay, so what I did was I used this command npx create workspace at latest. That means I am going to create a new workspace and I'm going to name it sft. Okay, sft, that is the workspace name that let's think as the project name that I am giving for this. Okay, so I'm going to give that name, and by using this, it will ask some basic questions. What are the frameworks and all? I think we have already covered. If you want to go back and see the video once again, basically it will create a simple application. That is, let's see, close one, close window. I don't know, need this. Yes, that is this application. You guys can see there are, I mean, don't get overwhelmed by all the things that you see it in here. Basically, it has set up a simple web application to us. Okay, simple, very simple web application with all the testing frameworks, with all the basic starting point for application and all the dependencies and everything to run our project. Okay, so there are a lot of pre-built things done for us, especially with the, you know, when we are done with the application, we need to build this application. This is the source code. Once we need to once we are done with the source code, we need to run it somewhere. Before we run it, we need to build it. So we have the build script running, we have the development script development script are there, building script are there, testing script are there. So basically, a simple web application is created for us by simply using those code generation tools. So first thing that we need to look at is this package JSON. Okay, as you guys can remember with the Express one. So we are not seeing Express directly, but if you go to NestJS core and something like that, you would find Express buried deep behind that. So there are other libraries that we are using, or packages that we are using, and there are dev packages that we are using. That means while developing, we will be using these packages, but when we want to deploy these things, these are no longer valid. We do not need these things in the running application. So for example, we have testing frameworks, right? We will test our program while we are building it, while we are in the development phase. Okay, once we developments are done, once we want to go to a hosting server and once we want to share this with the world, we do not need the tools that we use while we are testing the application. So we would have left down all the testing stuff while we are building the application. After we build it, we do not use the testing libraries. So that's why we have two dependencies type. The dev dependencies, which represent the dependencies that we'll be using while we are developing, and dependencies. So these are dependencies we need in order to run and develop at the same time. Okay, so these are development time needed and these are runtime needed. Okay, so we will not look into these libraries. We probably won't be looking more into this unless we need to add a certain functionality to our application. For example, if you want to add database connectivity, then we will install a certain package that we will be using. Okay, we will see that in a moment. Right now, we'll be focusing on getting the NT architecture and running it once again. Okay, so in order to get the application structure, so we need to know the package JSON. We can have a look around it, and the most important folder is going to be this src directory. Okay, so src stand for source. That is the source code of our application, and inside there are few files. The main file, which is something like the app.js file that we have seen earlier on, and probably you will find something similar, the app directory, and we will have the listen port thing. So it's gonna also run on port 3000. Okay, so we can also, while we are running, we can change that, but if we do not specify something, it's automatically gonna run on port 3000. Okay, so this is like, do not worry about all these global prefix and everything, which and the bootstrap methods, all these things. Just think when we run this application, it's gonna start a web service on port 3000. Okay, you can have look around these things later on. Right now, we are running an application with port 3000, and you guys can remember the endpoints that we had on the NestJS application, right? Now, as a good practice, we have endpoint prefix with all the APIs. That means I'll show you. That means if you have endpoint called message, by default it will be rewritten to API messages. If you have an endpoint called user, by default it will be rewritten to API users. Okay, so that is something the community follows. When we are developing an REST API, we normally have the prefix called API in front of that. Okay, so when we run this application, it will start application in port 3000. Okay, so let me run this application. Simply, I will go to the directory from the terminal where I start the application. So it is in SWT. So this is the location that I have choose. The project right now, it is in the TMP and SFT directory. It can be within your programs or documents, projects, whatever the location that you say. So basically, go to your terminal or command line, open the command line where your project is there. So how do you know that is the same directory? So you guys can see the package JSON. Okay, if you like try to explore it, and if you see the package JSON right there, then that means you are in the correct location. Okay, make sure the package JSON or the at least whatever the files that you have seen is visible. That means you are in the correct location. Okay, so in order to run this application, like what we did in the earlier on, we have certain other things prepared for us, especially what we call a hot reload. And there are certain things we have already configured in this. So if you guys can remember, when I write the NestJS application, if I do a change, I need to stop and I need to run it again. And if I do a simple modification on my source code, I need to stop it and run it again. But with this project setup that we have come across, we do not need to do that. Whenever we do a project, when we do a project change and we save it, and it will be automatically reload for us. We don't need to reload our servers. We do not need to stop or anything like that. We do our coding, we save it, and it will be automatically reloaded. Okay, so you don't have to stop every time and go back and do those things. So everything is set up for us. We don't have to worry about that. We'll simply try to run this application. So we can run this application by simply looking at one single command. Under the package.json file, you'll find scripts. Okay, these scripts are what able to run this application. So in order to run, there is the commands might be different, but in this example or in this project, we can see the start script. That means we will be starting our server. Then there will be build script. That means it will build our application. And there is a test script. That means it will test our application. So the name implies what it does. So if I want to start the application, I can run this script. Okay. So simply I can run by npm start command. Okay? If I run npm start, the application will start. And if I want to build, I can run this script in different way. Okay, so if I want to test, I can run npm test. So by looking at it, I will say npm start. Okay, so if I hit npm start, you guys can see it will take a little bit time for the first time, and it is not like the Nest.js application. The Express.js application that we created. It will show some logs. Okay, it will say, okay, our application is running on localhost port 3000 and API. We'll just simply go there and see what's going on. So the API endpoint is given for us. You can just simply copy, or you can just copy this and paste it in our application. And what you guys get? A simple message saying hello API. Okay, so we will get a simple message, a simple JSON. The key is message and the value is hello API. Okay, so we get a simple JSON response when we go to localhost port 3000 and API endpoint. Okay, so you guys might think, okay, there is app.get, like what we have seen in the previous example. There will be something like something similar there, right? Yes, but a little bit of different is that we have in this framework, in this Nest.js framework, we have introduced what we call tiered architecture. You will see the tiered architecture. Anything with this project setup, I know there are like a lot of files in here with capconfig. What are these? Do not want to worry about these files in this stage. All you just need to know, okay, the package JSON is there, and the src directory is here, at least src. And familiar one is not modules, as I mentioned earlier. This contain all the runtime libraries, and other things just for now just ignore. Any questions up until this? Okay, at least you guys need to create a project and you need to start. Okay, so you know where to get the script. You can say npm start and the application will start. Okay, and there is another command that you can run if you look at the project JSON. So project JSON, sorry, not the project JSON, package JSON file. The start command is also can be achieved by nx serve. Okay, you can say two things. You can say npm start, or you can say nx serve. The both will do the same thing. It will start the application. Okay. Any questions up until this? Because we will be digging into the entire architecture afterwards. Okay. Awesome. If you guys have anything, just interrupt me anytime. Okay. All right. Let's go back to the source code itself. As we discussed, we will be starting from the src directory, and we looked at the main. Just simply look at it as it's starting the web server on port 3000 and starting the bootstrap. Okay, and one thing that we need to look is in here something called app module. Okay, there is a there is, when we are looking at this file, it is creating, or it is using something called app module. This is not something that you find in the Nest.js application we have, but simply in here, what we have done is, as I mentioned earlier, we will be splitting up our application. We'll be separating these things in different forms. So modularization is something that we will consider. So a module, think a module as a single feature within our application. For example, we talked about several things in our system. We talked about users, we talked about schools, and we talked about teachers. Okay, so within our system we will have three features: user, school, and teachers. So we have three different features within our application. So we can categorize, or we can have things related to users within a user module. Okay, something related to user we will have within a user module. Something related to the school, we can have a school module. If something related to teacher, we can have a teacher module. So think all the tiers and everything linking to one another, as in a single entry point, or single packaging point, or single feature point. We can call it as a module. Okay, so the app module is a special module in this framework. Okay, the app module is where we have all the modules reported. This is like the starting point for our application. Okay, so we have a starting point for application. So the app module have few things. You guys can see these what we call these decorations. Do not worry about these things right now. So we have things like controllers. So if you guys can remember, we have three tiers within our application. The first one is the endpoint, or the controller layer, what we call. So we can have all the controllers defined in a controller layer. Okay, and we can have the business logics. If we discuss business logic, we call, in this framework, we call these things providers. Okay, do not expect all the frameworks in the world will call these things as controllers, or endpoints, business logics, or data layers. Okay, each framework has its own definition. Okay, so in Nest.js, the controller layer is basically controllers, but the business logic layer, what we call, is something called in here we call like providers or services. Okay, and in the data layer, we do not call that as a data layer, but we call it as a repository. Okay, so different things have different namings, but the architecture, the three tiers, will remain most of the time the same. Okay, so within the app module, you will find controllers and services. Okay, the providers and controllers. So these are the controllers that we saw. If I go to the app.controller file, you will see the controller. As you guys can remember, you guys can see the event to API. Nothing, no endpoints are available there. So it's gonna be responding for this. Okay, and the data that we are getting is coming from the app service. Okay, and you guys can see the thing that we have seen in here, that is called the hello API. Okay, that is what we are getting here. So we will forget about all these things. Just want to show you guys how it works, and we will create a module from scratch. Okay, we'll create a module from scratch. We will define the controller layer, we will define the service layer, and probably a dummy repository layer. Okay, because we do not have the database, everything set up right now. Right now, we will create a simple module and we will incorporate into our application. Okay, we'll see how we can create multiple modules and incorporate. Okay, so basically,